Subscribe and press the bell icon to never miss an update from Firstpost.
I think India's economy remains heavily dominated by industrial tycoons, and so from Ambani and Adani to Malia, some of the other figures I deal with in my book, these are the giants of contemporary Indian industry. India's not alone in this. Lots of Asian economies have family-owned conglomerates led by industrial tycoons. But I think it is a problem for India. India needs to develop more companies that look like Flipkart and fewer companies that look like Reliance, and that will be part of its long-term growth story. One of India's problems over the last 10 or 20 years is that too much money has been being made in sectors that are very close to the government, where you can fiddle rules and do what economists call extract rents. And so, you need to do two things about that. One, you need to make the government work better, make these rules more transparent, less susceptible to gaming. And then the cleaner sectors, in a sense, need to expand. So the areas like technology, pharmaceuticals, where there are fewer problems of corruption and rent-seeking, need to take over, in a sense, some of the other sectors. So I don't think this is a problem that's going to disappear overnight, but reducing the amount of rent-seeking, trying to make it more difficult for entrepreneurs to gain an extra yard of pace by working the political system is a critical part of India's future success. So I now live in Singapore, and I wrote the Billionaire Raj in Singapore, and so I've learned a lot about East Asia's development experience. And I don't think what India needs to do is that complicated. East Asia invested heavily. It built basic forms of state infrastructure, good basic schools, basic forms of social support. So if people became unlucky, they didn't fall off a cliff, as it were. I think these are things that the government here are trying to do, but at the moment are only doing, in a sense, half of what needs to be done. And so I think India can go a long way down the same path that East Asia went before it, but only if it learns some of the lessons that you need to have less corruption and a more functioning state infrastructure. So Raghuram Rajan, when he was governor of the RBI, gave a very elegant description of the way that politics and business interact in India, which is that because the state doesn't work very well, politicians often provide some kinds of basic services themselves. They'll be the people you go to get your kid into school, or to get access to a hospital, or to get a form signed. And that's a big problem, because in order to do that, they need money. The only way they get money, both to provide these services and to run very expensive elections, is from business. And so they're beholden to business. And this is, in a sense, the original sin of India's democracy, that it's very big and very expensive, and almost all of the money that is taken to run it comes illegally under the table. This is something that will not be easy to fix, but I think it's fair to say that under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, it's actually gone backwards rather than forwards, and that's partly because Modi himself and the BJP are one of the main beneficiaries of this system. In the next election in 2019, this year, they are the ones who are going to get more money from business people. They're the incumbent party, and so they've had no incentive to solve this. And so India's electoral system is just as bad as it was 5 or 10 years ago. One of the tragedies of Indian politics that struck me when I was writing the Billionaire Raj is that literally no Indian politician, with the exception perhaps of the odd Rajya Sabha cricket player, can gain office without being corrupt. In order to win a large, expensive election as an MLA, as a Lok Sabha member, as a Rajya Sabha member, you need often crores of funding. The rules don't allow you to do that. So everyone has to raise money under the table. Obviously, some are much worse than others. But the question of what you can do about this, I don't think it's possible to imagine a cheap state-funded party model in India. I think that horse has bolted. And so what you have to work towards is, for all of its flaws, an American model, which is big, raucous and expensive, but at least has some measure of transparency, that you know which rich people are giving money to which politicians, and at least that gives you a measure of accountability. I think that is basically the best that we can hope for. So one of the great joys of writing a book like The Billionaire Raj was the chance to meet all of the people who I profile in the book, from Vijay Mallya to Gautam Adani to whoever it might have been. And yes, as you say, the thing you notice about India's billionaires is they're not violent thugs. These people are often very charming, they give a good account of themselves. But one of the things you try to do as a journalist is you want to meet people, to try and ask them your own questions and try and understand where they're coming from. And in India, where people are relatively open and business people are willing to meet you, that was one of the great joys of trying to write a book like this. So yes, I think meeting them was essential. I felt like I learned a huge amount by meeting someone like Vijay Mallya, and was able to give a much richer account of him and why he acted the way that he did than I would if I hadn't met him. So the subhead of my book, The Billionaire Raj, is a journey through India's new Gilded Age. And so I, along with a few other people, make this analogy between India today and America in the latter 19th century. It's not an exact analogy, but it's useful. And one of the things that you learn about America in that period is it was very much like India now. It had huge problems of corruption. It had rapacious wealth creation. It had politicians who were really in it for themselves. And yet, over the next 20 or 30 years, there were various things that happened that reformed the United States dramatically. You had urbanization, which helped the urban middle classes take control of politics. You had progressive political reforms. You had leaders like Theodore Roosevelt who took an axe to corporate power. All of those things and more are perfectly possible in India. And so I think over the next 20 or 30 years, it's not going to happen by accident, but it's perfectly possible that you could have a change in leadership in this country that would mean that India grew rapidly and in a way that was much more inclusive than it is now. And so I suppose I would say, even if sometimes I come across as being bearish in the short run, I'm very bullish in the long run. There hasn't been a huge amount of backlash against the book, which I've been pleased about. Some people have said I was too critical of India. Some people have said I wasn't critical enough. Some people have said I was too easy on Mukesh Ambani. Some people said I was too hard on him. So I think that's a reasonably balanced account. I think most of the people I profiled in the book felt that my account was pretty fair, and in a sense that made me happy as well, because my aim in writing about Vijay Mallya or Gautam Adani or Jayalalitha or Arnab Goswami was to give a fair account of these people that they themselves would recognize. I wasn't in it to be a hammer of businessmen or a sort of harsh critic. I wanted to understand what made these people tick. And so the fact that none of them thought my portrayal was grossly unfair, I think was to my mind, that meant I'd done a reasonably good job, and I was happy with how the book turned out.